We've kind of grown up knowing everything about everyone.
People work at like 2 a.m. sometimes on a Tuesday and they just email you, and obviously they don't expect you to reply, but if you see it, you just think, oh, well, I better reply now.
If you're not checking 24/7, your brain goes, I might be missing an opportunity. Someone else might get in there before me. We shouldn't hold ourselves hostage to everything that we see on social media.
You don't see other people's like insecurities, tears, breakthroughs, breakdowns, hard work thing. You just see like the outcome, and then you're like, oh, they're so lucky.
Hello and welcome back to the Calm Within the Storm podcast, all about navigating mental health in a bid to find contentment within the chaos. Everything can change. In this episode, we'll talk all about social media and the impact it can have on us and our mental and physical well-being. Today I'm joined by ELERI, and ELERI is a musician and also runs a PR company.
Yeah, so I run Monday Media. We do PR, we do sort of music workshops, a bit of marketing, kind of touch the bases with their marketing campaigns for musicians.
Amazing. So you spend a lot of time on social media.
I do spend a lot of time on social media, yeah.
A lot of experience to put into practice here then for this conversation. But today's topic of social media, I feel like we could spend hours, if not days, talking about the impact of it, our dependency on it, our relationship with it. But I'm going to open today's discussion with our first Ask the Audience question. Mm-hmm. Just to get an idea of the general public's relationship with social media. So the first question I asked people was, how frequently do you check your social media? And I had 4 options. We had multiple times a day, once or twice a day, every other day, or once a week or less. And kind of unsurprisingly, really, multiple times a day came in at 81%. Once or twice a day was second place, that came in at 10%. Every other day came in at 3%, and once a week or less was 6%. So that was just that little bit higher than every other day, so that's quite interesting. But 81% for multiple times a day, it's not surprising.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of like breakdown your followers are, but as someone who works on social media, I'd be like, well, that's because I work on it and that's why I check. But it's interesting to see that people who maybe work other jobs are still doing the same thing, and I think it's kind of caught us all in this kind of constant need to be checking in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the people who participated in this are a whole different range of ages, all different jobs, so they're not all just musicians like us. Some people are international, not just in the UK, so a bit of everyone. So it's a universal kind of statement, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
And I then asked, what do you think makes it difficult for you to check your social media less often? And this was for people to select their top answer, because obviously we probably have a good handful of reasons why we find it hard to come off of it. But the options were, my work is linked to my social media. My social media is my social life. It's an established habit/routine, and other. And I'll start with the highest. So the highest was 73%, and this was an established habit and routine. Next was my work is linked to my social media, and that was at 23%. Other came in at 6%, and 0% of people said my social media is my social life. But I actually want to read one of the responses that someone put in as their other answer. And they put FOMO, fear of missing out. And I totally get this. Not knowing what's happening within the friendship circle, missing things with work. You might not consider it to be your social life, but you're used to seeing everyone's days. You know, we've kind of grown up knowing everything about everyone. When social media is taken away from you, it almost leaves you with a bit of an isolated feeling.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting that you said no one put the option of social media as my social life. And I think for a lot of people it is, but I don't know if I'd be prepared to like admit that to anyone, or like I'd even thought that through. If someone asked me if it was my social life, I'd be like, oh no, it's not. But I don't know what is my social life, because a lot of it is on social media. So then I guess it could be described as someone's social life, but maybe you hadn't kind of thought that through, or you just didn't want to like admit that to yourself, because you know, no one wants to admit that they don't have an offline social life. And what you said about FOMO kind of makes me think, well, is that not your social life then, if it's fear of like missing out what your friends are doing? So it's kind of an interesting thing that no one has picked that answer like explicitly, and maybe they hadn't realized that's what they're using it for.
That's it. I think it kind of it almost is a subconscious thing, because
Yeah.
we're so used to checking what's going on and we're so used to seeing it all day. You kind of don't maybe think about it as being your social life, because you're not actively participating in an engagement as such, whereas you would if it was a conversation. And I think because you're just looking at almost news stories, I guess, of the day, pretty much, that isn't necessarily a social life. But if that was taken away from you, you would very much feel like your social bar has completely disappeared. So it's a funny one, isn't it? It's a
Yeah,
fine line.
definitely. And you know, you're going onto social media, you might be like, oh, like I'll see what Sam's up to. You know, I can just go on your page and like I know that you've been on a radio show, you've done this, you've done that. Whereas before it would be like, oh, I'll give Sam a ring and I'll ask her what she's been up
Yeah.
to, and we'll have a nice chat or go for a coffee or whatever. And that it kind of, maybe it's not a natural social life, but it's replacing what then would be your social life in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's also then what makes it so hard to put it to one side and come off of it
Yeah.
for a while, because you're so used to seeing everything. If you don't have that, it feels like you're out of the loop, you're not in the friendship circle, you don't know what's going on, and nobody likes to feel like that, you know. Everyone wants to feel involved. And so I think that's a really good answer as to, you know, what is a difficulty for coming off of social media or checking it less. Makes complete sense.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, phone companies are very clever. They know, or like all these designers, they know what keeps you on your phone. So like you have your alarm clock on your phone, and all these apps, like maybe you go to the gym, it's like your fitness apps on your phone. Like I've got type 1 diabetes and my blood sugar monitor is on my phone. So like I have
Wow.
to be picking up my phone. For
Yeah.
musicians, you know, our emails on our phone, we're booking gigs on our phone. It's all encompassing, and it's so easy then to just go onto social media, because why not? Because you're already on your phone. I think for me, it's
Exactly.
like everything's in it, and it's not just social media.
Exactly. And then that's where it becomes, I guess, the habit and the routine, which so
Yeah,
many people voted for. I think it becomes a point of which you don't even think about the fact that you're doing it. So, first thing we do when we wake up, our alarm goes off, we have a little scroll before we get out of bed. Last thing we do before we go to bed, we'll have a little scroll, see what's going on. And you don't even notice that you're doing it. And I think the resolution to this, the first thing, is acknowledging the habit,
yeah,
because that's what none of us have really done before, in a way. I mean, it's very easy to go, oh, I've spent too much time on social media, but noticing when you're doing it is the hard part, because you're so in the routine of turning your alarm off when you wake up and then going straight to
yeah.
Facebook, which a lot of us do. You don't even notice you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I listened to a podcast on this recently actually. She was mentioning putting like, say, like an elastic band around your phone, so that when you pick it up, you have that
Mm,
second to go, why am I picking my phone up? Is there actually something I need to do on my phone, or am I just picking it up? And so rather than picking it up and then half an hour later being like, where, like I've just lost half an hour, like what have I even done? You
yeah.
have that moment that you can go like, do I need to check my email? Yes, I do. Okay, and then you've decided to do it rather than kind of
Yeah.
unconsciously doing it. So I thought that was a really, really interesting point, and I did for a week try and do that, and I completely like got out of the habit of doing that. But I thought it was an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Keeping up a habit, that's really hard. I
Yeah.
remember reading a book. I can't remember what the book was now. I'll have to have a look, but it was about a book all about building habits and breaking habits and that kind of thing. And it was really good. And one of the things that they said was you have to do it for, is it about 6 weeks or something, for it to end up becoming a habit. And that feels like a really long time. But if you can stick to something after 6 weeks, that's when you get to the point where you're not thinking that you're doing it, you're just doing it. And I guess in terms of building a new habit with your social media and breaking the old habits, think about ways that you could do things differently. So again, like when you pick up your phone in the morning, acknowledge straight away that you've picked it up after your alarm's gone off. Change your routine to maybe, I'll check it whilst I'm having my breakfast, so then I'm getting straight out of bed when my alarm goes off, I'm feeling snappy and feeling productive, and then I've got 5-10 minutes to kill whilst I'm having breakfast, I'll check it then. And similarly at night before getting into bed, maybe check it whilst you're brushing your teeth, and then no phone. You know, it's forming a new routine. But I think it all comes down to just acknowledging that you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really hard to change something if you're not aware that you're doing it.
Yeah, which is the biggest problem, I think, with social media. And then next up, at 23%, we had my work is linked to my social media. And again, this is another difficult thing because I think, especially in our kind of job, especially in our industry, if you're not checking 24/7, your brain goes, I might be missing an opportunity. Someone else might get in there before me. And that's, it's dangerous thinking to think like that, but you can't help it. It's so hard not to think like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you only have to miss out once to be like, right, that's it. I'm never not checking my phone ever again because I've missed out on this gig or this thing. And I think the big opportunities that are kind of meant for you will find you in some way or another. But it is those little things like,
Yeah.
I do a lot of cover gigs as well as like my own music, and we've got like various different group chats where people will be like, someone can cover me, I've got a bad throat and I need help now, and you're like, okay, I'm going to, like, I haven't got a gig, I needed one. Or it's like, oh, like this bar's looking, has anyone got these dates? And then they chuck out a load of dates and everyone replies, and then you miss out, and you just feel like you constantly have to like have your notifications on, have your phone on you, or you're gonna miss out on an email or a booking. And I think that it kind of is like a constant state of stress, and it's not even like you can turn it off at 5 p.m. and like leave and that's it and that's work done. Everyone stops working. Like everyone works all sorts of different times of the day. We already work evenings and weekends, but people work at like 2 a.m. sometimes and on a Tuesday, and they just email you, and like obviously they don't expect you to reply, but if you see it, you just think, oh well, I better reply now.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult, I find, that way. Not quite sure if I have any solutions on that one just yet.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this, and I think, well, for a start, we've got to stop guilt tripping ourselves more than anything. There's plenty of work that goes on that we don't see. We don't feel guilty about missing that. So why are we guilt tripping ourselves into, why did you miss this job that you just saw? We shouldn't feel like that, but we do, and it's something that I guess we need to learn to stop the guilt trip. But also, another thing that I recently started doing, and I think I saw somebody else doing it, was making my work time on social media more time efficient. So only going on there with a set purpose, and once I've ticked that box, I then come off it. Or having like with music, if you see a gig offer or something like that and you want to comment and say, okay, hi, this is what I do, here's my links. If you have a template message written in your phone notes that you can just copy and paste with each job offer, you're then not writing a whole new thing every time you see a job offer. You're just being time efficient. You're going, okay, this is what I need to do, right, and now I can come off.
Yeah, I do that exactly with venues. I've got like a wedding one, a venue one, a thing, and then you just quickly edit it and post. So yeah, I do the same with that as well.
It's a really good idea. It just saves you all that extra 10 minutes of writing something bespoke. You can customize them, yeah, fine. But having a template will save you so much time.
And everything in it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. And another thing, so going back to the habit and the routine, a resolution that I had a little note of there was something I did a while ago, was I set up a list of what I call boredom breakers. So if we have like 10 minutes spare or something like that, our first instinct is I'll go on my phone and just have a scroll or whatever. But if you have a list of other activities that you can do that require as little effort to access them as it does picking up your phone on social media, then do that. If you can have a notebook to hand at your desk all the time and you can do a little drawing, or you can write a poem, or you can do something that you enjoy that requires really little effort and will take you 10 minutes, it's an alternative to picking up your phone.
That's really interesting actually as well. I wanted to read more, was my my New Year's resolution. I haven't even picked up a book yet. I've been kind of doing audiobooks, which is kind of a different thing, and again using my phone, but it's sort of what's been helping me do that. But if I even I pick up a book or I'll go to watch a film, 5-10 minutes in, my brain's like, oh, but what if I'm missing something? It's a really weird anxiety almost around that, and just sort of your phone in your hand is almost like a comfort, and it feels so alien that you think that now. And I think a lot of people have that, not just FOMO, but it's almost anxiety that they're missing out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe to get around that, could we, I don't know, dedicate like half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, and strictly that's it. That's all you're doing for work opportunities, because otherwise you can spend your entire day just scrolling and looking for things. But if you're covered in the morning, you're covered in the afternoon. You don't need any more. Yes, there might be other people that get in that couple of hours in between you, but you're covered in the morning, you're covered in the afternoon. You don't need
That's a really
any
good,
more
that's a really
than that.
good point. I think a lot of the time, we start because we think it's about work, but then we kind of justify scrolling. We tell ourselves it's work, but it's kind of,
Yeah,
it's just the habit. It's just the unconscious habit.
it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I'm going to move on now to our next audience question. And I asked, which of these difficulties have you faced or struggled with from your experience with social media? And the options were insecurities, for example, jealousy, comparison, competitiveness. It could be your appearance, your life goals, your successes. Intimidation, so online bullying or petty drama, things you don't think would have happened in real life, but it's a bit easier to do on social media. Isolation, feeling disconnected and isolated even though we are connected to everyone and everything now. And the other option was other. And insecurities came out at 59%. Isolation was at 35%. Intimidation 6%, and other was 0. I mean, all of these points echo with me on some level, but I think insecurities is a huge one, because you're constantly looking at other people's lives and wondering what they think of you. You want to impress people. You look at how other people look and think, why don't I look like that?
Yeah,
It's easy. It's
I
a rabbit hole, isn't
feel
it?
that. And just, not just in music, but in life. But I think especially in the job that we're in, it's all based on
Yeah.
followers and opportunities and who's done what and who's got what. And I think especially for me, like this January, it just so happened that a lot of people that I'm friends with had like hit the uni year and they were ready to announce like tours, or they were ready to announce songs, and I'm still recording my album and still tweaking it. So like I'm just in a different phase of the creative process to them, and they're in the announcing and
Yeah.
doing and getting it out phase, and I was still in the creating phase. And I was like, oh my god, I'm not ready. Like everyone's ready, everyone's doing everything. And like my like manager sat down and was like, no, you're just in a different phase. Like, you're just in this chunk, and then you'll be in that bit when they're like making their next record or whatever. And I think thinking of it like a sort of seasonal thing, and that you're just in a different season or you're just in a different phase, that really helped me. And I think maybe if that could help you in terms of if someone else has got like a promotion or like they've got a new job, maybe like you're not in that phase yet, and that'll come to you when it's sort of ready to.
Yeah. Exactly, almost what you just said is that you look at other people's lives and you think, why isn't that me? Why aren't I doing that? But you don't think about all of the little steps that got that person there, and that this is their path that they've chosen to go on. This isn't your path, and you're taking a different route, and different things have led you to where you are now. You look at someone who's traveling the world and you think, why aren't I traveling the world? But this person might not have gone to university,
Yeah.
they might not have got the job that they wanted to, and so they've decided to do something else. And that's how their life has panned out. Everyone's fully in control of their own lives, but you shouldn't look at other people's accomplishments and think that needs to be my accomplishment, because your accomplishments that you have yourself are still perfectly valid, and other people are looking at them
Yeah.
and thinking, why aren't I doing that?
Yeah.
And so we can't compare our paths in life to other people's paths in life, because we've all just taken different directions and we've got to different places at different times and via different routes.
Yeah.
And it's all still as successful as each other.
Yeah, I saw just in terms of like you said about the work that's gone into like different things. I saw a meme yesterday that was like, you don't see other people's like insecurities, tears, breakthroughs, breakdowns, hard work thing. You just see like the outcome, and then you're like, oh, they're so lucky. But you didn't see any of
Yes.
that, like the iceberg kind of
Yeah.
concept where you're just seeing the tip and you're thinking, oh, that's amazing, that's come out of nowhere. The same with like
Yeah.
people who sort of pop up as like an overnight success story. They're not. They've
Yeah.
probably been working 10 years to like break through that little barrier that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had, I guess, similar feedback surrounding that. So a couple of people wrote in with further comments to this, and somebody put a difficulty they face is looking at other people's high aesthetic and romanticized lives, and it can be very depressing. And somebody else said, I sometimes think everyone else is in a happy relationship apart from me. And that is so sad, because you're right, you know, we just see the little peak of the iceberg. We don't see all of the stuff that's underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially, I think, is it today's Valentine's Day? You're gonna, you're
Yeah.
gonna be seeing like everyone's like, oh, I love him so much. We never argue. We never like fight over the dishes. We never do this. We never do that. You're just seeing the people that are happy at that time and that are happy enough to share what they're happy about. So you're not seeing like
Yeah.
people who are struggling with things. And and there's some great content creators and sort of influencers and different people to follow that do share the other side of it. They share when they're upset and they're crying, but it's like it's human nature to not
Yeah.
want to share that. So a lot of people will hide that or just post when good things happen to them, which is completely understandable. But
Yeah.
then you're comparing the bad things that you know are happening, like in your life, or like the things that you haven't got right, the things that you're still struggling with, still working on, to someone who seemingly isn't doing the same thing, but they probably are as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then somebody else also put, I don't like seeing pictures of myself. And this one breaks my heart a little bit, because I think life is too short. You know, people see every angle of you on a daily basis. They see you mid laugh, they see you gurning when you're mid conversation. And just because that's captured on a picture, you shouldn't feel embarrassed by it. I think, like, if you're looking back at your photos in 50 years time, or your kids are looking at your pictures in 50 years time, whatever, and they see a picture of you mid blink, mid laugh, or just looking goofy, that's showing your personality.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to remember your mannerisms, and the people around you right now are going to look at that picture and go, oh, that's them, I know that's them, look at their mannerisms.
It's funny, isn't it? And often, like, you see a photo of you and you're like, oh, that looks nothing like me, because you're only used to seeing yourself at like a certain angle in the mirror when you or
Posed.
like posing in the mirror, taking a photo. And other people don't. They do see you all the time. So you're kind of
Yeah.
the only person you're actually hiding from is you, because everyone else already knows what you look like. And they do, like, as you said, they
Yeah.
do see you at every angle. They do see you when you're like looking like not your best, or you're unattractive angle,
Yeah.
or like when you're not being flattered in like the nicest perfect daylight or like ring light or whatever that is. They're seeing you in like in a bar when you've had like one too many and you're like wandering around, or they see you just
Yeah.
sitting down staring at your phone with like a little frown and like a double chin or whatever it is, that
Yeah.
all of us get. So you don't see that because you're, if someone takes a photo of you in that moment, you'd be like, oh my god, is that what I look like from the back or like from the side or whatever that is. But everyone else already knows, so you're only really like hiding from yourself. I
Yeah.
saw a good post actually yesterday of someone talking about like when we used to take photos, like photographers would have all these like different ways. They'd have these big cameras, they'd have to like hang up their negative photos in like a dark room and like dip them in water, all these different things they had to go through. They're not going to do all that to be like, oh, I don't like my thighs look in that photo. It's like, oh, that was a lovely family picnic with my family. It's about the feeling and the moment rather than nitpicking all the little details.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I also think, kind of in relation to that as well, is now that we've got access to just taking pictures whenever we want, wherever we want, why not embrace that and capture as much of a person's personality as we can? When you think, for example, in your Facebook memories, when your Facebook memories come up every day and show you what you were doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, the pictures that you're curious to look through are the pictures that are authentic and were taken during an experience or an event or something. The pictures of you just like pouting and posing and things, you scroll past them and you think, oh yeah, I look quite nice in that picture, but 5 minutes later you've forgotten about it. But if you see a picture of you laughing with friends, or even just somewhere in the background, and you're caught in a blur or something like that, that was taken with a purpose of capturing that environment, and that is a memory that will stick with you forever. Not you posing against a nice backdrop or something. They're lovely to have, those pictures, but that's not the you that people will remember. People will remember the you that was, engaged all the time and interacting and just being you with the double chin, you with the messy hair. That doesn't matter. People don't care about that stuff. They care that it's your personality that's coming through, because that's what they remember.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. And also that everyone's sort of so concerned with what they look like, they don't actually care what anyone else looks like. They
Yeah.
think of it in the same way. So like, I'm never going to see a picture of Sam and be like, oh no, like Sam looks this or that or whatever, you know, I'm just like, oh, that's Sam.
Exactly.
You know, and occasionally, obviously, you know, you do get times where you're like, oh, they look really, really lovely in that photo. But then, like, you know, when you take them yourself, you're like, you've probably taken like 20 selfies to get like the perfect angle with like the right expression where you're not like frowning or you haven't got a wrinkle somewhere or the light's not quite right or whatever it might be. I know I'm definitely guilty of that, and I'm sure other people are as well.
Yeah. We always try and make ourselves look as perfect as possible, but when we meet people, taking them at face value, you've just accepted that person straight away. This is what they look like. That's imprinted on my brain. I know their face now. You don't question their appearance at all.
Yeah.
You know, that's the face that you know, and that's it. And I think it's really sad. I personally find it really sad that people are so caught up in how they look that they're like, I don't like my nose, I need to change my nose. I don't like my facial structure, I need to change my facial structure. And nobody else has acknowledged this about you. It's just you looking at yourself with a lot of critique. It's you looking at other people and thinking, why don't I look like them? But they're not your genes, you know? You were born looking like this, and everyone you know has accepted how you look, and that is just how you are to them. That's it. They've just taken you as you are. No one's thought twice about how you look. So why are we so caught up in going, I don't want to look like this? Everyone else has accepted it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's all sorts of filters on like the stories, but even like ones that have like a game on or are meant to be silly, they still like make your face look weird. And I sort of used one once by mistake, like I used it for like the colors or something, and then was like looking back and I was like, oh, my nose looks like it's just not my nose. And I was like, I really don't like it. It made me feel like really strange. And then I'm like, I don't want other people to think that that's what I look like all the time.
Yeah.
You know, as much as like, you know, you put makeup on, you do your best to look your best, whatever. When it starts changing like your bone structure and things, then things you'll never really, I mean, I guess you probably could change now with like surgery, but you know, they're things that largely we're not going to change or need to change or want to change. And I just think it's quite sad that we can almost do that without meaning to, and it just completely alters the way you look and the way, you know, if you're talking to people and connecting with people, as like we all want to be doing on social media, especially as artists, looking like what you actually look like is, I think, key. You never want to turn up to a gig and people go, oh, like you don't look anything like any of your photographs or something like that. You want to be authentic as much as you can.
Exactly. And I think once you start altering things about your appearance, like major things, I mean, you can wear makeup, you can dye your hair, but major things like having surgery and that kind of thing, it's a big rabbit hole to fall down into, I think, because what is the end goal? I feel like once you start changing things, it's very difficult to then settle and go, yes, this is perfect. It's like losing weight or gaining weight. You always look at your body in the mirror and you never think, my body looks like that model's, or, you know, it's never what you see on other people. It'll never be that. No matter how much weight you lose, no matter how much you go to the gym, you'll always go, I'm not big enough, I'm not skinny enough, I'm not this, because your body isn't theirs. You don't have the same skeletal structure as them. It will never look like that person. It doesn't matter what you do, and to then kind of artificially alter how you look, you're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to then want to do the next thing to make it perfect. And the easiest thing, well, the easiest and the hardest thing in the sense, is just to accept who you are, what you look like, as you are, as you come. It's so difficult to do that, but the moment you just accept things, you never have to change things ever again.
Yeah, and I think sort of acknowledging that might not happen. You might not just be able to accept overnight, but making steps every day, maybe it's like affirmations or you know, whatever kind of works for you to kind of keep up that work. Because I think the most dangerous thing about being able to change your face and your body more easily than like ever before, and especially, you know, celebrities have got like the money and the means to do it all the time and the time to recover and that kind of thing, is that, you know, we used to have like fashion trends and like what you wear would trend and change, and then things come back in, like, you know, we've had this sort of 90s revival, which is really funny for me because I was like around in the 90s, so I remember like all of these out of fashion and now they're coming back in. But I think the dangerous thing now is that body trends come back in and they go out of fashion, and you can never keep up. You can't constantly be changing what your actual body looks like or your face looks like to fit in with what's like good this week. Or, you know, if you can go back through like body image all through like the 20th century and probably before that as well, and it's like curvy was in, and then the next decade like really skinny and like muscly was in, and then this was in, and like, there's absolutely no way that, you know, your body type's your body type, and you're never going to be able to keep up with constantly changing. It's really unhealthy to to as well.
Yeah, and that's it. I really like the point that you just made about it being trends,
Yeah.
because ultimately that's all it is. That's all it is. Exactly. We could come 10 years down the line and it could be completely different. You
Yeah.
explore with makeup, explore with style, whatever. But when you permanently change something, you can never go back to what it was like before.
Yeah, completely. And, you know, we only have a certain amount of time on the earth as it is, you know, you kind of just want to be enjoying as much of that as you can. But you never know that, you know, someone's probably looking at you and going, I wish I had Sam's hair. I wish I had Sam's like lips or eyes or like figure or
Yeah.
whatever that might be. When you're looking at someone else going, oh, I had curly hair, like her hair's really cool. And, you know, you always want what you can't have. So there's kind of no point
Yeah.
just constantly comparing because you're all completely different people.
We all feel that pressure of judgment, don't we? We all want to look like someone else, and then we think they think I'm ugly, they think I'm not good enough or whatever. But it's like we've just mentioned, it's completely not the case. No one else is thinking about about you. We're all thinking about ourselves ultimately, and it's yeah. Why are we so wrapped up in trying to impress people when it's just not the case at all? And I think we look at these really, really beautiful people on social media and think, why can't I be that person? But ultimately, if that person had a really nasty personality, they're going to lose all of those followers very, very quickly. Their looks have got very little to do with how loyal their friends are going to be. They're going to have a very empty life, and surely it's so much better to be the person who is loved and appreciated and accepted than the person who people go, oh, she looks really nice, but actually I really don't like her.
Yeah. No, completely. And, you know, it's the same of like, you might have millions of followers that are kind of, yeah, they're all right, I'll follow them. But they're not invested. They're not like following your journey.
Yeah.
Kind of better to have like 100 followers who are engaged and, you know, especially like as we're talking about working on social media as artists or like whatever job you might have in social media. You want ultimately an audience that is going to listen to your music, buy your music, relate to you, come to your shows, want to meet you and like actually have genuine like connection. And using it that way rather than having like maybe a huge following because you've posted some pretty photos and people are like, oh yeah, I'll follow that, but it's not like they don't really care, they're not invested, they're not, oh I can't wait to hear like her next single or whatever that might be. Like you want actual human connections on these platforms, and I think that's kind of the fine line of where we need to be kind of focusing our attention. And if you spend too much time just growing on social media, you lose touch of like why and what you're actually sharing, what you stand for.
Personality nowadays is a massive thing to buy into. I mean, you just have to look at Lewis Capaldi's come about
as well.
He has built such a following just from having an amazing personality. Like, people want to be on his side because he's won them over, and he's almost like a friend straight away. I mean, it should never matter what you look like, but if people want to be friends with you and you treat people like friends and they treat you like a friend, is that not a win-win for everyone?
Yeah, completely. He's a really good example actually of like, because his music's very sad, but he's such a comedian that you buy into that.
Yeah.
And he's just great to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wrap up on that bit, I think, because I feel like we could end up talking about this for forever. But moving on, a couple of questions left that I had for our audience. Over the course of your experience with social media, would you say it has had an impact on your mental health? And the options were yes, negatively, a lot, yes, negatively, a little, yes, a positive impact, or unsure or no impact. And I was quite surprised that this was actually quite an even spread.
Wow.
So negatively a lot came in at 10%, negatively a little came in at 30%, a positive impact came in at 25%, and unsure or no impact came in at the highest at 35%. And a couple of the comments that we've had, someone said, it's had both positive and negatives for me. For example, my first job came from a Facebook conversation. And I think we'll be able to relate to that one, absolutely. We probably get so much work just from meeting people online and having really standard innocent conversations that then lead on to massive things.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of gigs, like 80 to 90% come from Facebook or just messaging, whatever. It's mad.
Somebody else has said, personally, I haven't allowed it to impact me, but I'm aware of the impact it has on others. I think it helps if you have self-control and self-love.
That's really nice. Here, people say, like, oh, I compare myself to people on social media. And I'm like, oh, I never do that. Thinking they meant, like, oh, they've got a nice house or a nice family or a nice. But then, like, if you're in a certain mindset where you're working on something and it's not sounding how you want it to sound, or, you know, you get a rejection email and then you go onto Facebook and you see the people that did get to play this festival that you're just been rejected for, I think that's when it can really affect you. In the past, I wouldn't have said, oh, I'm comparing myself, but, like, I am. So it's sometimes really hard to acknowledge the effect that it's actually having on your mental health, or linking it to that. So sometimes you might just, for me, it's like I feel like I'm so down, like I'm so drained, and then I'm like, what have I been doing this morning? I've been looking at the news, and I get a lot of my news from like Instagram, and I try and just follow the accounts that kind of give you the facts. You can have a look, see what's going on, and then turn off. But then you see, you know, people sharing like, oh, nurses are on strike, this is terrible, but this is even more terrible, and like this person's been murdered by her husband, and you're like, oh my god, like everything is just kind of completely, not even comparisons, but it's just draining, and like you're constantly feeling like, oh, everything in the world is difficult and hard and my life is difficult, and you kind of create even more, and just the energy of that, I think, really rubs off on, like, I found it a lot with me, and I don't necessarily realize that that's what's happening at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder as well, has our relationship with social media changed over time? Like, is it different now that we're adults than it was when we were kids? Because I feel like when I was a teenager and I was on social media, I felt a lot more vulnerable and susceptible to criticism and what people thought of me and petty drama and that kind of thing. Like, that was much more what my teenage experience of social media was like. Whereas now, I feel like it's a lot more different. I'm going on social media to look at what my friends and family are doing because I'm curious. I'm being sold products that are interested to me, you know. My experience of social media is wholly different than what it used to be. And that's probably like by choice of my lifestyle choices. Like, I go on social media now just to connect with people and to get inspiration for my life and that kind of thing, whereas before I didn't. But also, social media itself has also changed dramatically over the years. And now when you go onto Facebook, for example, you log in and the first thing you see is a targeted advert that's wanting to sell you something that you might be interested in, and then you end up down that rabbit hole. But that has also then warped our experience, because has that made it more positive? Has that made it more negative? You know, it's definitely more personal now than what it was when you were a kid and you were just looking at all of these celebrities on there and wanting to be like them, and why weren't you like them, and you've got all the pressures of growing up and you've not learned from your mistakes yet, of like, you insult someone on social media that you don't have the consequences like you would in real life, and you're still testing the waters and things like that. So it's a tough one, isn't it? I think there's a massive change between ages.
Yeah, I think the difference for me is, and I don't think it's the same for everyone, because I definitely see much older people than me arguing in Facebook comments, but
well, yeah.
for me, like, I think growing up with it as well, I feel like I didn't have social media in the same way as a teenager, so I had things like MySpace and Bebo, and like,
yeah,
I feel like that felt more like friendly, that you were kind of with your friends, and I didn't kind of maybe have the knowledge that there's like this massive global audience. I didn't get Instagram until I was like 21, but I even then, like, been on Facebook in like my late teens, early 20s. I feel like I would share things, I'd be like really passionate about things, and like I'd argue with people in like comment sections about different things and get like really like angry and stressed. And now I think the difference is just a couple of years after that, I see someone's post and I'm like, oh, like that's wrong, or like, you know, if it says about an issue or like a political issue or something, or even like, you know, you see musicians ranting about things and you think, oh, I want to comment and say like, oh no, I've never had that experience, or like, no, you're wrong. And then sometimes I'm like, do you know what, it's not worth me being stressed about, oh, if they replied, what have they said, oh, they're being horrible. I've been caught up in loops before where you're so frustrated and you're like, it's just someone I don't know on the internet who has a completely different opinion. I'm never going to change it by arguing with them, even if that was my goal. And it's just kind of like, it's not worth me being stressed about for like the next 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that as well for like days after, and be like, they're so wrong, it's not right. And it's sort of like, it's not worth your peace and all the things that you're going to then not be able to do, or the work you're not going to be able to focus on, or the song that you can't write because you're just thinking about this this completely nameless, probably faceless person often on the internet. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like learning what's worth it and what's not.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think a lot of people should also have that mindset. And the phrase that springs to mind is one that I think everyone's grandma has probably said at some point, where if you haven't got something nice to say, don't say anything at all. And
Yeah,
it's true.
I completely agree. Or like, if you've got something that you desperately need to say or you feel like you need to express, like take your time, like don't just reply straight away, because all sort of like knee-jerk reaction is going to be negative, or it's going to be like, you're not going to be able to think it through. And often, like, I've reread things I've written and been like, why was I so rude? Or like, why did I think that was the right way to kind of express that? Or like, why was I so blunt with it? And sometimes I've been like halfway through literally writing a comment, like a long comment, and I just, you know what, it doesn't matter, I'm just gonna delete it. It really doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
not, especially like anything music related. I'm like, I don't want to weigh in. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
anyone to think negatively of me in any way, or like lose out on work, because you never know who's reading your comments and that sort of thing. So I think it's quite difficult, especially when you're young, to be aware of like how many people can read what you've written and how long things stay on social media.
Yeah.
It's kind of dangerous, like when someone stands for an MP or like for an important like high profile job, and then it's, but they said this on Twitter in 2009, like they're a terrible human, and then like everyone goes mad
I
about it. And it's
know.
like, we should be allowed to change our opinions and move forward. But I think it's
Yeah.
really hard if you've posted something online that's so definitive that you can kind of be brought up later. And I'm not saying don't post anything either. It's a really fine line, I think, between knowing like when to post things, what to post, and like what's a bit risky. And
Yeah.
you've heard of people like losing jobs over it and all sorts of things. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's scary
Yeah.
that, if I think about what I was like when I was a teenager, I'm a completely different person now. And thank goodness a lot of my teenage years I wasn't on social media, because if I was, I'd look back at that and go, oh my God, how embarrassing, how terrible. It's horrible for the people who are in the spotlight, who are under scrutiny for
Yeah.
something that they said 10 years ago. Now, if you are a completely different person than you were 10 years ago, that's a horrible thing to then experience, And another thing as well is that I think when you're saying something on social media, it's very different than saying it in person, because you don't have the reaction of the other person in front of you. And so it's almost an inhuman reaction then that you are putting. There's no consequence to what you're putting. If you put a disagreeing comment back to something, you have no consequence of saying that. You can say that and it doesn't bite you back, if you know what I mean. It may very well do, but if you said that in person, it would be a very different situation than how you've said it online. You wouldn't say that in person. Why are you saying it to a stranger? Because it's not a stranger that's on the other end of that. It's another human who, if you were reading that about yourself, you wouldn't like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's quite dangerous now. There's always accounts that comment on, different posts, and you think like they're not well, they might be real people like behind it, but like they're not that person's real name. It's not that person's face behind it. You can't even link it back to them. Like there's nothing stopping like you, for example, from like setting up a little alter ego account and just like trolling everyone, and like no one would know it was you. So it's kind of like, I'm obviously not suggesting that you do anything like that, or do you? But yeah,
Yeah, it's dangerous.
there's no like face to it, so you're not suffering any kind of consequences from that. I know a lot of accounts that just post horrible comments on issues, or like really nuanced posts, and you just think like, you haven't even got a profile picture, I'm not listening to you.
Yeah, you just don't know anymore. And it doesn't even matter. That's the thing. That's the scary thing. I mean, even if it is you that's saying those things, you're saying it to a stranger, and strangers don't have feelings, so it doesn't matter. But it's such an inhuman world online. Like, people just ignore feelings, and they ignore that people absorb this information. And like, if I was to say something about your appearance online, you're going to remember that for a very long time. It's not just something that you've just read or just heard. It's gonna stick with you. It's permanent.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's like, a lot of the time people think like, oh, celebrities don't see horrible comments. They do, but also like someone else might see that. So if you're saying like Kim Kardashian's like on a bit of weight, like she looks awful, someone else might be like, oh well, I've put on a bit of weight, like what if I look awful? Like if she looks awful, like I look really awful. So it's not just that person that you're saying horrible things to that's going to see it. It might be someone else who's going through the same thing.
Exactly. And people really forget about that. They really do. It's so damaging. So, like with any mental health struggle, if it's undealt with, it can eventually take form with physical symptoms. I mean, you just have to look at stress and anxiety. When you say those words, a lot of people think it's solely an emotional experience, but actually, if you don't deal with it or you don't get support or the right support for it, it can very, very quickly catalyze into something that affects your body, affects your physical health. And especially with social media, like we were mentioning before, it's very easy now to alter your appearance, and that is another physical impact of, a mental health struggle. If you didn't like the way you look, you can now easily change it. So I then thought I would ask the audience a final question. Has your relationship with social media ever resulted in changes to your physical health? And the options were yes, a lot, yes, a little bit, unsure, or I can't pinpoint the source to social media, or no. And amazingly, 0% said yes, a lot.
Good.
6% said yes, a little bit. And joint 47% and 47% both said unsure or can't pinpoint the source or no, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was trying to think, like, has it happened to me at all? I think in like small ways. So like, oh, I've seen like a makeup tutorial, and I'm like, oh, I'll try bronzer in that way. Like, I've never done that before. Like, and yeah, I think that's kind of a positive thing. It's like about just trying things out. Like, I bought like a load of like not a load, but like I bought some gold jewelry because I saw someone wear it, and I was like, oh, that looks really nice. Why don't I try that? Or obviously influencers like are trying to sell certain things, like whether it's clothes or jewelry or whatever, hair products. So I think that's kind of like it's just a sort of fun sharing way. I think the danger is if it gets to like something that would affect your health physically. So, whether that's like extreme dieting or exercise or, like any of these physical changes that we talked about, like surgery or anything like that. So I think there's definitely a level where it's healthy and okay.
Yeah, and I think the one that springs to mind for me is like body dysmorphia, because I feel like social media has a massive role in that. And I'm really glad to see that not many people have been physically impacted by that. But I think, again, if I think back to me as a young person and me as me now as an adult, I think I was much more prone to body dysmorphia when I was younger based on what I saw on social media. Whereas now I think I've learned to accept it. I've learned how to do my makeup properly, and so I can feel more confident about myself in other ways. Whereas maybe before I was still kind of learning who I was looking at all these really pretty people and thinking, why aren't I pretty? And now I don't care. Now it doesn't bother me whatsoever. But again, I don't know, is that an age thing, or could that, again, I mean, that impacts people throughout their life. Body dysmorphia is a huge, huge thing. And I do think social media has a massive role to play in that. But I'm just really glad that the people who did participate in this have said that they haven't been impacted physically on such a big scale. That's really amazing.
I think the kind of positive of social media, which we haven't maybe touched on, is that whatever you're into and whatever you're doing, you can kind of find your community. So like in terms of body dysmorphia, there's a huge like body positivity community on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram. And once you start finding that and feeding that into your algorithm, you kind of get all that sort of thing. So I think there's so much diversity in things like fashion. It's like, maybe it's like, well, what do I want to wear? What works for my body? What do I feel great in? I'm never going to try and squeeze into like really tight low-rise jeans, because I'm like, that just doesn't flatter me at all. Like, I'm short. It doesn't work. I don't have long legs. I can't wear flares. Just me, like that's my life. But okay, I can find other creators who look like me, or who would like wear the similar things that I wear. Or like for me, like it's like the country music scene. There's a really cool load of fashion about that, and they're all different shapes and sizes. So it's like cool. Like what does someone who's my height wear, and what looks good on a short person, or what looks good, and I can just go like what actually looks good. What do I feel good in, regardless of trends, regardless of like what's in or out this year? What do I actually feel my best in? I think in terms of all sorts of other things, if your life is like revolves around music, you're sort of seeing what other musicians are doing rather than seeing it, and it's kind of interesting because there's so much diversity, and as you said, everyone's on a different path. So I think not trying to pigeonhole too much into one area that you don't see the diversity, but I think there's also, you can find your tribe, as it were, on social media as well, which I think is a really positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you just mentioned, now there's so much more support on social media. There's support groups, there's communities, there's a whole new section of the virtual world that is supportive and offers that help and, I guess, sense of family, I guess, to people who previously probably would have felt alone in dealing with how they felt.
Yeah.
Amazing point.
The more honest we can be with all our content, the more people realize that people are going through the same things, or that
Yeah.
they're going through something that you maybe went through 5 years ago, or something you haven't gone through yet, and then you go through like a heartbreak or a loss or whatever horrible thing, but you think, oh, I've seen other people go through this, it's not like weird. I'm going to talk about memes I've seen, but this is like the positives on the internet. You do see like these things that you agree with and that really resonate with you, and it was saying that everyone goes through insecurity and imposter syndrome, body dysmorphia, all these things, but the people who are successful just realize that that's just part of life, and that's not a weird thing that only they experience. It's saying like, yeah, okay, I don't feel maybe qualified for this job that I'm applying for, or I don't feel like I deserve this festival opportunity, and having these feelings, but the person who's headlining that festival probably at some point had that same feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely. We forget when we look at digital people and digital names, we forget that they're human. And even the people you see on telly, even the royal family, they've still got feelings, and people really forget. I'll wrap it up with just a couple of comments that we've had of that other people have sent in relation to social media as a whole. And somebody has put, I've always struggled with real world socializing. Social media allows me to take the time to say what I really mean. And I think this is actually a point that we've not really touched on, and I find this quite interesting because we quite often talk about how hasty people are to make comments and how things don't necessarily feel as sincere on social media because you just say something quick, whereas in person maybe you'd go into a bit more depth or whatever and have that bounce back of conversation. Your social bar is going up as opposed to kind of just, I'll answer this message and then get on with my day. For the people who do struggle with that socialization and communication, having an opportunity now where you can really think about how you're responding to something must be so beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's like, it's true, and it's just how you use it then. I think of it as like, I might meet someone like at a networking event or a festival. Like I met Matt Spracklin, who was a presenter on a couple of different radio shows, and before, if I'd met someone and was told, oh, he presents on this radio show, I'd be like, oh my god, I'm so like starstruck, and I'd have so much nerves I wouldn't be able to talk to them. But because I'd followed them on Instagram for a year, maybe chatted to them once or twice, commented on a post, saw their story every day, I'd be like, oh no, I feel like I know them as a human. And I think that's quite nice, having like things like stories and like the kind of the be reals and being more authentic. I think it makes you more approachable in real life then, that I feel like I know you to have a conversation with you. I'm not just going to be like, oh, if this is someone I've never met before, because even if you've never actually spoken on social media, you still have an insight into their life, or you can have like an you can say like, oh, I saw your dog on your story the other day, like, oh, he's so cute, what's his name? You've just got like a conversation point that if you struggle with interactions in person, it might help you to have something to kind of refer to, or you can message someone on social media and say like, oh, I could love to meet up, I saw that you're going to like Buckle and Boots Festival, what day are you going, let's meet up and have a drink, and you've kind of made that initial bit that you might have been too scared to do in person. So it's definitely,
I think that's a brilliant point. And finally, one more comment that we've had that I'll just read out. Someone said, you are exposed to only the top 0.01% of the most talented or best looking people in the world, so it's almost training you to feel bad. And it's very relatable. I mean, you open your Instagram and even just in the highlights of what you see, you've got people who have drawn incredible artwork, people who've incredible models, like gym goers who are amazingly built, and this is a very, very small, minute percentage of the entire world. And these are people who've probably honed their craft for a long time or whatever. You don't see the 99% of all the rest of the world who are average but still good, like what the most of us are at and what we're doing. And it's difficult when the standard now is so high. In the old days, I say the old days, back when before the internet was even a thing, you'd only really have the people around you to compare yourself to. And if there was a good artist in your group and a good singer or whatever, that was just the standard and that was their thing, and you didn't need to worry about that being your thing or whatever. Whereas now we all want to be good at everything because we see something amazing online and we go, oh my God, why aren't I doing that? I need to be good at that. And it's unachievable. It's just, there's so much incredible stuff being posted constantly. There's no way that we can accomplish all of these things, and we shouldn't compare ourselves to the
Yeah,
best of the best all the time.
it's really interesting what you said about you'd have your friends and things, but before I think celebrities would be like on the TV, so you'd have that level of like, oh well, they're not normal people, they're like a different level, so you wouldn't necessarily compare. You know, you might compare, but you'd still have that idea of like, well, they're celebrities, then you know they're not living normal lives. Whereas I think on social media, everyone's so much more like accessible, and you see into their normal lives that you think like, oh, their normal lives are just amazing. They're not even celebrities, and they're just amazing. And everyone like has this perfectly toned physique and all that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
you're just not seeing what normal people look like, or like normal bodies look like on
Yeah.
a day-to-day basis. And you know, it's easy to be like, oh, I've got like a little bit of flab on my side, or like my belly's a bit big, and you just don't see normal tummies online because
Yeah.
people don't necessarily post them or whatever. And like there are people that do, and I think
Yeah.
that's really positive, that just seeing, oh, like when I sit down my tummy rolls up, because of course it does. Like that's what
Yeah.
happens, like that's what they do, you know. Like and most people probably would, they just wouldn't take a photo at that angle. So I think
Yeah.
it just kind of goes back to what you're seeing is only a small part of the truth.
Yeah, we shouldn't hold ourselves hostage to everything that we see on social media. I mean, we see an amazing person, we should just accept, oh wow, let's feel good for them. Oh, what an amazing thing that
Yeah.
they've got themselves to that stage. We don't need to do that, you know, we don't need the big bum and the big boobs in order to be beautiful and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. You know, this is
And
our body, this is us.
well, whether that's sort of fake through surgery or just a completely edited photo, you know, you never know. You know, you see
Yeah.
how airbrushed and photoshopped things get now as well. So you're really not
Yeah.
comparing your version of the truth to someone else's. You're comparing completely different things. There's
Not
really no point.
exactly, exactly. And it's true. It's like this person said, you know, it's the 0.01% of the
Yeah.
whole world's population is what you're looking at. And that's an unrealistic statistic. Why are we holding ourselves hostage to this 0.01% that we should be like? We can just be us,
Yeah, and I think it
you
really
know?
stunts your own progress and growth to be comparing
Yeah.
yourself at that. That's going to make you feel like there's no point even trying. Whereas you could
Yeah.
have so much growth and experience, and you could have so much progression as either an artist or a singer or whatever it is you do, that
Yeah.
you're missing out on because you're just thinking, well, I'm not them, so there's no point.
Yeah, and it goes back to the point that we raised earlier in the conversation of this is your path, these are your achievements. Give yourself credit for what you've done thus far in your life. Your route is different to 99% of the world's. This is how your life has panned out. No one else can replicate this. No one will probably replicate this for the rest of existence.
And that's
Just
what
feel grateful for.
that's what makes it interesting to follow, and especially as
Yeah.
a singer-songwriter, that's what people want to see, the journey. They want to go like, okay, they did that first, and then they did that, and then they did this, and like this
Yeah.
other person did it completely differently, but they still got to roughly the same place. And I think that's like where, you know, it lies in
Yeah.
the story, and what got you there is the most interesting things sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Write your own book.
Yeah.
Write your own book. I think that's a nice place to wrap things up. But is there anything else that you want to touch on first before we
No, not
wrap
really. I
up?
just think like a couple of sort of takeaways maybe from the conversation are just like we said, you're on your own path, don't compare. And there's nothing wrong with social media if you're using it in the right way. I think just
Yeah.
being aware of your habits and being aware of the reason that you use it. So I think these questions you asked were really, really insightful. And even just getting people to think like, why do I pick my phone up? Why do I go on social media? Is
Yeah.
it benefiting me? And even if it's not, you know, just asking yourself that question and acknowledging it and making it become less of an unconscious habit and more of a conscious decision and a tool that we can use for better or worse to improve our lives, hopefully. And I think just being a lot more conscious about it is the kind of the key to addressing some of the issues that we've flagged up.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I think we've got plenty of interesting points from today. But thank you so much for joining me.
No problem. Sorry, the sun's been like chasing me around the room.
So tell us, just before we love you and leave you, where can we find you online?
Yeah, so I'm ELERI online on most platforms now. That's like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that sort of thing. It's ELERI online. And my business for PR is Monday Media, Monday with 2 A's. And we're mostly on Instagram. So we can get in touch that way if anyone wants to run any sort of PR or marketing campaigns or just have a look at our content. We've got some top tips and tricks about how to grow on your Instagram, how to contact press if you're an artist, and a little bit on how to deal with social media as a whole as well. So hopefully that's quite useful as well.
Amazing, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye! Everything